Welcome to the Navigating Business Decisions video series. I'm Grace LaConte, and I will be explaining the Business Resilience Scorecard, which is a tool that we provided at the end of this report. The report is a product of a survey that was conducted with the help of students at Kent State University in Kent, Ohio. We provided the survey to a large number of business leaders in Northeast Ohio, and 53 of those people responded and provided us with a lot of information that could be useful to other business leaders and owners as they approach difficult choices that affect their business. So you can find this report on my website, laconteconsulting.com/Ohio-survey. And this is the scorecard that we provided in the appendix. You can find that at the end of the report here. The appendix provides some tools that we thought would be really useful for other leaders who want to apply what we've learned through this study in their own situations. So we have a business resilience checklist, which I explained in the last video. Today we're going to go over the business resilience scorecard, and then we have a few other things we'll be getting into in future videos. So the business resilience scorecard, first of all, resilience in my experience is the ability to take difficult situations and become stronger through them for the sake of building a business that can continue through time. It can be sustained, it can have ongoing growth that is healthy and not sudden growth and then have a potential crash. It also is a quality of leadership that looks at the entire situation and not just a singular aspect such as profit only or revenue only. There are a lot of other things that business leaders might want to achieve as they move through the timeline of their business through their ownership arc. So resilience is the ability to take difficulties and challenges as they occur and not only prepare for them, but work through the difficulties of understanding what has happened in order to make better choices moving forward. So there were some themes that came through this survey, the responses from the 53 business leaders that we worked with, and also 7 people who provided additional insights through interviews. And these are some concepts that we think would be useful to other business owners as well, based on the data that we collected. So first, data is really important. Not only was it an integral part of how we looked at the information from the survey, but also we found that a lot of owners and leaders are using that as a tool to make better decisions. So not only do they rely on their intuition and gut instinct, which was 64% of our respondents said that they do rely on that, but also many of them are choosing to or would like to add the data and the information that can be acquired through actually measuring quantifiable aspects of their business. So data-informed decision-making can take place in several aspects, and you can use this scorecard to rate how your business is currently doing and also potentially highlight some areas where you might want to focus on improving it. So first, we consistently use analytics tools and frameworks to guide critical business decisions. If you are doing that, you would rate a 4 or 5 on strongly agree. And if you are not, you would rate it as a 1 or 2. Second, our leaders can effectively balance intuition with data-driven insights. Again, this came from the responses from our survey. We found that quite a lot of leaders are relying primarily on intuition, and we found that there can be challenges with really understanding what the data means and how it can apply to future decisions. So data-driven insights would be a good balance to using gut feeling. Third, we regularly evaluate past decisions to refine and improve future strategies. Even though it may not be pleasant, looking to past decisions and evaluating how they went and what you could do to improve or change is a very effective way of helping you to speed up your movement toward the goals that you have for your business and potentially avoid making decisions that could be harmful or that could cause damage to the growth potential that you have, or even to your relationships or to your legacy. Next, key performance indicators, or KPIs, are tracked through an accessible reporting system. In my experience working with businesses, I find that this is often a missed opportunity of maybe there are key performance indicators in place, such as increasing output or adding more new customers or engaging with old customers to increase sales. There are many ways to measure your progress within your business depending on what you do. However, is that system accessible? Is it being added to by different departments and different individuals in your company? And can that system be accessed and used by a lot of different people who could benefit from it? If the KPIs are only reviewed by the top leadership team and no one else in the company is even aware of these KPIs or has any access to real-time data on how it's going, then that have a negative impact on the business's ability to continue to improve over time. And then stakeholders are involved in decision making to achieve outcomes. Stakeholders of all types are involved in decision making. We found through this survey that a vast majority of businesses do not necessarily involve all of their employees in strategic decision making or even planning for the future. I don't think it's necessarily because leaders don't want to involve them, but maybe they don't have a way to do that. They don't have a mechanism, or they may have had experiences where if you add too many chefs in the kitchen, there's chaos. If you give too much control to people at all levels of an organization, certainly that can result in bad outcomes. On the other hand, stakeholders means anyone who really has something worthwhile to offer, and that can be anybody in your company. So if you have a way to involve them, even if it's in a process of collecting feedback from them, or if it's inviting their contributions to meetings where you are talking about future decisions. It could also be that you build this into your review process so that there is a two-way street. It's not just about how the employee has behaved in their role, but also how they might evaluate the company's performance from their own point of view, how they might make adjustments to the department that they work in. That can create a lot of really positive information that can be then used to achieve your own business outcome. So if you add these scores up, the top score would be 5 points each for 5 different entries, and then that would equal 25. So whatever your score is, you put that here, and suggested action for this section is train leadership in data analysis, review decision alignment with your business goals. Another point from our survey is that a lot of business owners realize that their business values are not necessarily communicated to the entire organization. And so there can be a mismatch between what the leadership team is trying to do or saying that they want to achieve and how they see the world and how the rest of the business is actually operating day to day. So this would be something to keep in mind as you're looking for what data to collect and how to apply that. The second aspect of business resilience that we found through the survey was employee engagement and contribution. Not only is turnover and employee attrition, or the percentage of workers who might leave the company for a variety of reasons, not only were those extremely important, but we also found a really big trend in the amount of engagement and the ability to collect information from employees while they're still employed, correlating to making better decisions. So the first point, our organization actively recognizes and leverages employee strengths for growth. We found this as a theme through interviews and also through the data itself. Next, structured feedback channels are in place to gather and act on employee input. Do you have a way to actually collect feedback from a variety of different ways in your organization that then lead to changes that improve the business, or are you only collecting information in ways that may or may not be acted upon? One of the key ways to have a healthy feedback loop is that there is proof from action that's taken based on that feedback. Otherwise, it's basically like yelling into a void. If employees are trying to provide their input and it's not going anywhere, or they don't see any changes happening, that can be really demoralizing and actually cause them to feel less engaged and less likely to want to provide more help to the business. It could lead to employees that don't trust the organization with their knowledge and potentially cause them to want to leave and go somewhere else where they are appreciated. Next, talent retention strategies effectively align with our long-term business goals. If you don't have a retention strategy for the talent of your business, then it can be really difficult not only to measure how that's affecting you, but also it may keep you from achieving your goals long term, because obviously talent is one of the key drivers for most businesses succeeding. Next, employees are encouraged to take initiative and contribute to innovation. This is something that I see a lot of companies say that they're doing, and a lot of leaders take credit for creating programs or encouraging employees to be engaged, and maybe they have certain people that are doing that. On the other hand, I also notice a lot of companies where this is not actually happening in a routine way. It is more of a kind of a trendy thing that may or may not actually feel engaging to employees. So are they encouraged to take initiative, meaning do you allow your employees to make decisions on their own within the scope of their role, or does it have to go through bottleneck decision makers higher up the chain? And also, are they encouraged to contribute to the idea of innovation, and are they rewarded for helping to come up with ideas that will actually improve outcomes for your business, or are they kind of relegated to just the role of their scope of their role alone and not necessarily provide their insights on how other parts of the company might improve? And finally, leadership fosters a culture of accountability and continuous improvement. One thing that we heard through the survey was that some of the leaders who shared insights about their leadership succeeding and their methods succeeding also tended to have a more humble attitude, where they gave credit to their team for helping them to succeed, where they recognized their own flaws and faults and their own lack of awareness. And when leaders can be humble in that way and recognize the pain that other people might be experiencing despite their attempts to try to create a good environment, that is actually a really good place to make changes that achieve the goals that you might want. So if you can become an accountable leader, an empathetic leader who tries to feel the pain and step into the shoes of your employees, that can actually lead to employee retention and continuous improvement as a side effect because of the self-awareness of those leaders. You add up the scores here, and out of 25, you can see how you rate on this section. A suggested action for employee engagement and contribution is to create systems to motivate employees and integrate them into strategic discussions. Next, we have succession and scenario planning. Several of the questions in our survey were designed to identify the current situation for succession planning and whether there are plans in place to make sure that the business can be handed over to others and that there can be a seamless transition as problems come up for the owner. So succession has to do with who will take over and run the business if the main owner or leader is not there. And scenario planning has to do with anticipating potential catastrophes or problems and then deciding how you might handle those well ahead of time so that you have the resources and the training and the decisions in place to create that alternative set of operations if the need arises. So first, our key staff are cross-trained to ensure continuity in critical roles. I have seen several situations where key staff are not available to continue working in their role, and that puts an enormous strain on the business as a whole and can actually hamper your operational efficiency and even the business's ability to continue operating. It's amazing how important certain key staff are. If you're putting too much responsibility on the shoulders of single individuals within your company, that may be a huge liability to the value of the business when you decide to transfer that to someone else. Because if those individuals are not available or able to continue in those roles, you're putting the business at risk of not functioning. So it's important to make sure they are cross-training with other people who could take over in case they're not available. Next, we have a formalized succession plan that supports a smooth leadership transition. I always encourage leaders to consider creating a plan regardless of where you are in the handoff process. Even if you're fairly young and have a lot of energy and things are going really well for you as a leader, maybe you've owned the company for many years and you don't see any changes that will happen in the next few years, that's fine. And yet the reality is we never know what could happen. You could have a medical emergency, a family emergency, there could be a huge delay, there could even be a death that affects the company's ability to continue operating with the current leadership structure. So a succession plan should definitely be put in place early enough that you don't necessarily have to critically change how the business runs if something catastrophic happens to the owner or leader. And also where it creates a path for that leader to exit, a smooth transition to the next leadership team or individual who you're handing it off to. I know this is not always an easy process, and it certainly can be very emotionally fraught, especially if the owner does not necessarily have an individual in mind who they would trust to take over for them. And yet, if you don't have a plan at all, things could happen outside of your control. I've seen several situations where the owner has a medical crisis and is not able to work in their role as the owner, and yet they were such a bottleneck for decisions in that company that the operations had to stop without them there. In one situation, the owner was the main salesperson and rainmaker, and so all of the sales up to that point kind of stopped because no one else knew how to take over his role, and the business valuation went way down. So when his children took over after he passed away suddenly, they were not able to recover the relationships with all of the people that he had created sales with over the years. So it was a really unfortunate situation for that business because the value was really in the owner's mind, and he hadn't transferred that to others before his unfortunate passing. I would suggest creating a formal plan, even if you need to make adjustments later, and then some sort of path to have transition to someone else taking over at some point. Then we regularly use contingency and scenario plans in our risk management strategy. I like planning for emergency problems because I prefer to be prepared rather than for things to happen so rapidly and without warning that there's no way to protect against it. These two kinds of plans are very similar, but a contingency plan has to do with creating reserves. So having enough cash available for a rainy day fund or for a sudden expense, making sure that your raw materials or your resources are available in quantities that could help you through some harder months where you have lower sales. A scenario plan has to do with anticipating situations that could be outside the norm of your business, such as a health emergency, a disaster, a slowdown of certain materials being available, customer shifts, economic effects. These types of things are scenarios that you can actually plan based on how that might go. So of course we can't anticipate everything that could happen, but what we can do is prepare for the most likely situations in bulking up areas of the business that might normally be depleted and could be of extreme value if you go through a tough period, and also anticipating at least the most common disasters or issues that could affect your business. Next, we have a crisis management framework that is well-defined and updated regularly. So a framework has to do with making sure that you aren't missing anything. So for example, all the systems in your company have a backup in case they go down. Your IT system has some sort of secondary way for you to document in case you can't use the internet. The personnel, if you don't have certain key people that can show up, you have backup people, you have a second way to still get the job done. If your main facility has a fire or some other disaster, you have a way to divert that to a secondary facility or a second way of doing business. So these are frameworks that can pretty much look at different other alternatives for all of the important aspects of your business running. And there's some great frameworks out there that you can find for free. I also have some information on my website if you want to take a look. Our approach to succession and crisis planning evolves with the business landscape. I think this is one thing that is probably the hardest about running a business. It's not necessarily the difficulty of finding a need in the market, looking at how to see the the gap between where your potential customers are and where they could be with your help, but it is also the evolving and constantly changing aspects of the market and of the economy and how people make decisions about purchasing something that could help. So when a customer purchases your services or products, they are filling a need or problem that they have identified, but they may not give you any advance warning if that need slightly changes. So the business landscape could have to do with not only materials being available for your production, but also anticipating the changes that happen with decisions at the customer end, whether it's loyal customers who suddenly decide they're going to go with a competitor, but they don't tell you why. That is actually a very dangerous place to be, because if you aren't anticipating that change, if you don't have all the information about why key customers leaving, it can leave you at a huge disadvantage in the market. So the awareness of how the business landscape is changing, especially in your industry, will give you more information to make good decisions about who will take over next and also what to do in a crisis. And again, you can score yourself on a scale of 25 with your answers. Suggest an action: invest in planning processes that anticipate risks and ensure operational continuity. I really encourage business owners to consider planning ahead in a way that is applicable to the choices that they're going to make next, and not just something that you create a plan, you put it on a shelf, no one ever talks about it again until the next 5-year mark when you have to make another 5-year plan. It should be a living thing that is constantly being updated, and that your entire company is aware of where you want to go as a leader. The last part of our scorecard is growth and profit optimization, which was another very important point that was made throughout the survey and the interviews, was potential for missed opportunities in identifying areas of profit that the leaders might have missed. There's definitely a sense of, am I missing things? I'm not sure how to make decisions if I don't have all the information. Where can I find this? Who can help me? So here's some keys that we would recommend to other owners and leaders. We regularly review underutilized assets and new customer segments. We heard from several leaders that say that they definitely want to utilize their assets as carefully and thoroughly as possible, and also that there may be of the customer market that they are missing, that they could be taking advantage of, but they aren't quite sure how to approach that or where to find them, even how to position their business to be most attractive to those markets. So strategic market positioning is a very important part of optimizing your growth and profit. Next, strategic decisions prioritize both long-term revenue growth and operational efficiency. We saw this theme quite a bit throughout the survey. The idea of revenue growth is great, but it can come at a cost if you grow too fast or without much consideration to the operational ability. If you don't have technology in place that can help to mitigate the extra workload, if your staff is not ready for the additional growth, it can actually hamper your business and put it at a disadvantage rather than it being a good strategic decision to grow quickly. Next, our cash flow management practices are robust and adaptable to economic uncertainty. Several of our respondents mentioned that they prioritize low debt load, and also cash flow tends to be a challenge regardless of the amount of debt they have in the business. It is a challenge for a lot of business owners to make sure they have enough cash on hand. So definitely, along with scenario planning and considering that having a contingency of extra reserves, it's also important to make sure that you're managing your cash flow throughout every month as consistently as possible, and making sure that you have enough to get you through some economic hiccups or changes that might affect you short term. We consistently evaluate pricing strategies and cost structures to maximize profit. There are so many ways to increase profit margins, and I find that probably the most exciting part of what I do with clients is identifying all the possible ways to not just cut costs, because that is one way to increase profit margins, but it's really not necessarily the best way, because cutting costs alone can actually lead to a decrease in production or in quality or value or customer satisfaction. So it's important to look at the entire picture. There's some other really exciting ways to increase the profit margins by increasing price with added value. So this has a lot to do with understanding how your customers are experiencing the services or products that you offer and what they consider to be valuable. You can actually add more value and increase your pricing and have customers that want even more of that, or even potentially open you up to additional markets where adjusting your pricing can actually appeal to even more ideal customers than keeping pricing low and trying to appeal to the most people possible. So next, we consistently evaluate pricing strategies and cost structures to maximize profit. There are so many ways to increase profit margins in a company, and that's one of my favorite things to do with clients, is to identify potential areas of leakage, which can come from decreasing your costs, but it doesn't necessarily mean just slicing all the costs across the board, because that can actually weaken your business and your position in the market. Sometimes it has to do with increasing your pricing strategically, along with making sure that the value you're offering or the anticipated value for your customers is also increasing. This is actually a really great way to appeal to better quality customers by understanding exactly why they buy from you, what they value the most, and what they want more of. You can actually create even more high ticket sales or increased perceived value while increasing your revenue and profit margins at the same time. And cost structures certainly have a lot of potential for evaluation over time, so that's something that you might want to consider checking regularly. And then the final one, we actively explore partnerships and new revenue streams for sustainable growth. You may be already doing this, and most likely you have partnerships with other businesses that align with what you do for your customers, and you may have several revenue streams already. Things may have changed, especially from COVID and through the enormous changes that we're going through as a country and around the world right now. Is it possible that there are some new sources of revenue that you just haven't identified to this point? And as I've mentioned before, there's so much that foundational staff can actually offer in feedback that could help to shape your future decisions when it comes to sustainable growth, because sometimes they can offer perspectives that are very difficult to see once you get to that corporate ladder bias level of leadership. So if you're open to hearing information about your foundational staff's perspective, it can actually potentially open up ideas for partnerships with other companies and streams of revenue that you just may never have considered at the top leadership level. So when you add up your scores here, you can get the total out of 25, and the suggested action for growth and profit optimization is to explore overlooked resources and align decisions with comprehensive profit strategies. Then you can take your 4 scores from these 2 sheets and add them up and see how you rate out of 100 when you interpret that. If your score is between 85 and 100, you are a highly resilient business. Your organization demonstrates strong practices across critical areas. If your score is 65 to 84, you're moderately resilient. Focus on improving weaker areas to boost overall resilience. And if you rate below a 65, your company is vulnerable, and we would recommend that you address gaps immediately to reduce risks and enhance stability. So the next step would be, if you haven't already, make sure to check out the Business Resilience Checklist, and which is here in the report. And also, you can consider using other aspects of this report and implementing them into your organization as well. So again, this entire report is available for free on my website, laconticonsulting.com/ohio-survey. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe so you can get alerted to new ones, and you can like, share, and comment to encourage other people to see this video as well. I will see you in the next one.